everyone and everywhere. And from that perspective, when we realize that supreme reality, we not only believe in, but we do experience the reality of spiritual oneness and unity of the whole creation. This is called Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga and Jnana Yoga. 3 types of yogas. In this particular text, you can find a brief examination of different aspects of these 3 yogas. Jnana Yoga means the philosophy of unity and oneness, spiritual unity and oneness of the whole creation. Bhakti Yoga implies realization of this through devotional practices. It could be practiced in any religious tradition, and this spiritual reality can be experienced even by those who do not practice any conventional religious tradition, by those who live a good life, those who mean good for everyone, those who try to practice broad-mindedness and compassion, understanding with their fellow beings. They also can eventually realize this great truth. So often the Vedanta teachers give the example of Buddha as one of those who realized and experienced this spiritual unity, even without going through the normal conventional practices of religion. And then there is this Karma Yoga, which is actually the most practical approach. That's a unique contribution of Bhagavad Gita. We can practice spirituality not only inside a temple or in a church or a place of worship, not only when we read a holy scripture, but also in our everyday life, wherever we are working, in our interaction with others. We may be working in a factory, in a university, in a hospital, or maybe you may be engaged in different types of duties and responsibilities, depending upon our profession, our own training, our own calling or place, our status in society. We may be engaged in any or every kind of activity. Each of these activities can be practiced in a spiritual way. So there is no need to think of doing anything in a non-spiritual way. It's not that we practice spirituality in the morning in a church or a synagogue or a temple or a Buddhist place, any spiritual place, and then the rest of our lifetime we are secular life. That's not what Vedanta teaches us. So first we try to connect a bridge, you build a bridge between the so-called secular and the spiritual. And eventually we start practicing the secular as the spiritual, and eventually the secular spiritual distinction disappears, everything becomes spiritualized. This anyone can start any day, any moment. Just link whatever we are doing to a higher spiritual ideal. Then becomes what is technically called Karma Yoga. Karma doesn't mean fate or destiny. Karma here means any activity. A word that we speak is karma. A thought that comes in the mind is karma. A deed that we do is karma. Anything that we do can have a spiritual dimension. And this is what all great teachers, all great mystics, all great men and women of God in all traditions, and also without any religious traditions, did realize. And this is a very important point to remember. So that is a unique and distinct contribution of Vedanta, and especially Bhagavad Gita. It tells us to practice spirituality minus God. Now, it doesn't in any sense imply any kind of rejection of God, any kind of avoiding the idea of God, not at all. What it means is, God is not something or somebody who demands respect and obedience from us. God is a divine reality that we practice, that we experience in our life, in our actions, in our words, in our thoughts. And then we eventually will realize the presence of this divine within us. And then we can't hate anyone. We may have to practice a discerning wisdom in our interaction with people. We can't expect everyone to be of the same type. There are differences. People are of diverse types, but still, we won't be hating anyone, we won't be hurting anyone, we won't be thinking of doing harm to anyone. So one can practice a kind of spiritual secularism, or what we call spiritualized secularism. The secular spiritual equation disappears, the secular merges with the spiritual. Whole life, every word, every thought, every deed becomes spiritual. So interestingly, one unique Sanskrit mantra, mantra means a sacred statement that is frequently uttered at the time of this spiritual ordination of monasticism in India. And you have to remember, it goes all the way back to 2000, 3000 BC, because the great Buddha also took to monastic vows, following exactly the same rituals and practices that we all had to do according to the teachings of Vivekananda and Sri Ramakrishna, who lived in the 19th century. So that mantra is let every word of yours becomes a mantra, a sacred word. Let every thought of yours become a meditation. Let every movement of yours become a pilgrimage. Let your whole life be spiritualized. I am giving an approximate translation of a Sanskrit mantra which comes in the Vedas, which are uttered at the time of spiritual ordination of monks in India. The mantras, the sacred words, go all the way back to at least 2000 or 3000 BC. So, right now we have reached the 69th verse of the second chapter. 69th verse. So we have only a few more verses to go before we complete the second chapter, and then we begin the third chapter, which is a elaborate, complete description and exposition of the art of combining action and contemplation in everyday life. That's called Karma Yoga, the third chapter. It's one of the very important chapters, especially its special significance to our own times. So the 69th verse is, Yanisha sarvabhudanam tasyam jagrati samyami yasyam jagrati bhudani sa nisha pashyato munehi. This is the 69th verse. The meaning is, what is night for the non-enlightened, what is night, what is darkness, what is non-existence. So what is night for the non-enlightened is day for the enlightened. And what is night for the enlightened is day for the non-enlightened. That means those who practice, I shall read, that which is night for all beings, for those who are not spiritually awakened, for those who are spiritually asleep in the darkness, in ignorance. So, that which is night means darkness. For the general people who do not have any spiritual aspiration, that in that night, the awakened man, the awakened person, the spiritually enlightened person, he remains awake. It is day for him. Because he is asleep towards the empirical pleasures, the worldly pleasures. All these things for him are non-existent. He is totally asleep to the world and is totally awakened to the spirit. The non-enlightened one is completely awakened to the world and totally asleep to the spirit. So it is a very metaphorical statement. So that which is night for all non-enlightened beings, for the highly evolved spiritual person who's fully self-controlled, for that person it is day because he remains awake. And that's in which all non-enlightened persons, that state of existence in which all ignorant in the sense spiritually asleep, spiritually non-awakened, that in which state all the spiritually non-awakened people are awakened, that is night for the enlightened. For the enlightened one who doesn't consider this world of pleasures as the only thing to be cared for. For those who do not think money, status and wealth are only things to be attained or attainable. So those who think that there is something much more, much more transcendental to be aimed at, for such people, this world is not a very big deal. They are asleep to the world. But what about those who think that the only life, the only goal to be aimed at, the only thing to be achieved in life is to have a lot of money in the bank, a lot of worldly enjoyments, and all the problems, all the depression, and all the pills and medicines that we take to get 4 hours sleep. This is the highest thing in life, nothing more. For such people, they are totally asleep to the world of the spirit, to the world of spirituality. This is the literal meaning of this. Now, what it means is this. Normally what happens, the simple meaning is what is daylight for the enlightened is night for the ignorant, and then what is dark, what is night for the enlightened is day for the ignorant. Because for the ignorant, the only thing is this world. So when we evolve in spiritual life, our understanding, our priorities also change. Children look upon toys and candies, all these maybe think momentary objects of enjoyment, pleasure. For them that's the only thing, natural for the stage. Because for them a little taste of the tongue is the only thing. But as we grow, we understand these things if we eat, we will end up in the hospital. Diabetes, pressure, all those things. So people naturally think of something higher, at least in the world of food. They start thinking of something much more healthy than candies and chocolates. So in our everyday life, there's a kind of reprioritization that happens. We change our priorities. We change our own idea or concept of what really matters in life. For the meaning is, for those who are spiritually enlightened, for them, this world is not the most important thing. And worldly enjoyments do not constitute the most important thing. We have to live in the world, but even in the midst of performing our duties and responsibilities, we will become aware of the true nature of worldly enjoyments. So, even while being engaged in all duties and responsibilities, we also remember the fact these things do not last for long. These things may disappear tomorrow. So what happens? That gives us a unique kind of spiritual wisdom. And that in a way convinces us of the transient nature of all that we normally consider to be the most wonderful things in the world. In fact, that actually helps us to cope with the problems of this world in a much more intelligent manner. So let us say, for example, suppose we believe that this body, worldly enjoyments, money and wealth, money put in the bank, all those things are the only things to be considered as valuable. Then the slightest bodily problem will have a devastating effect on our mind. Because we think this body is very important. There is nothing more than this body. For the slightest problem at the bodily level will be a disaster. For those who are interested in music, philosophy, not necessarily even in spiritual literature, those who are interested in creative writing, art, music or painting, dedicating their whole life and energy for reaching a very high level of perfection in those areas, for them a slight bodily problem will not be a very damaging experience. Because even if doctors report you are a cancer patient, a great artist may continue doing his work. It may upset him, but he won't consider his life totally without any meaning or without any value. That's what happens. A person suddenly gets the news from his doctor, you are suffering from cancer or serious heart problems. But if he's a great artist or a musician or a poet or a philosopher, it will certainly be a great painful revelation to him. It will be very painful news to him. But it will not completely crush him the way it could crush a person who has nothing else to do, who doesn't have any higher ideal in life. What does it mean? When we take a promotion in our own interpretation as to what we are, when we interpret ourselves to be something much more than this body, then we can cope with problems of the body and take in our stride. We'll be able to live with it. It may be painful, but still it won't be too much of a dilemma. Now suppose you can take yourself beyond the mind, let us say. Now when you transcend the body, when you go beyond the body, you are able to deal with the problems of the body in much more efficiently. But suppose we can go even beyond the mind. That's what he says. So those who are ignorant to the world, those who are asleep to the world, those who are non-awakened to the world, what it means, they are awakened to the spirit, to Atman. They identify themselves with something beyond the body, and not only beyond the mind, but with Atman. So those who can interpret or identify themselves with something that transcends not only my body but also the mind, they can live with psychological problems more efficiently. So that's why there is no permanent solution for bodily problems at bodily level. At a psychological level, there is some solution. And there is no permanent solution for psychological problems at psychological level. There is a permanent solution at the spiritual level. That's why the Ayurvedic medical practitioners, ancient Indian school of medicine, one text is Susruta Sutras, a number of Sanskrit Pidi statements. He says, Prasannatmendriya manaha sosthaga idya vidhiyate. So there are two sections in this verse. One section deals with a definition of what constitutes the ideal physical health. And the second line is a definition of what constitutes ideal mental health. So, samadosha, samaknischa, samadhatu, malakriya. This means when our body, our metabolism, all the systems are functioning properly, there is no disturbance, you call it physical health. In fact, we are actually dealing with the subject of sthita prajna lakshana, means characteristics of a spiritually enlightened person. So, a spiritually enlightened person is the healthiest human being you can conceive of. Not only physically, even psychologically, because psychological health means spiritual equilibrium. Without the help of spirituality, no one can be psychologically in a state of perfect health. The second line defines prasannatmendriya manaha susthaha iti abhidhiyate. Sustha means healthy person. Healthy in body and mind. That's the meaning of sustha. Swasthya means perfect health. What it means is, when our mind doesn't declare when it doesn't give declaration of independence, when it doesn't remind you of its existence, then you are identifying yourself with something beyond mind. See, let us look at the body. When do we feel a bodily problem? You have a stomach problem. Your stomach is reminding you, here, I am here. When you have a headache, your head is reminding you. When you have toothache, the tooth is reminding you. Then only you really focus on your tooth. If normal person will not be meditating on his tooth, but if there's a tooth problem, toothache, he'll be thinking about his tooth. So what it means, when we feel anxiety, depression, melancholia, and too much of anxiety, too much of concern about various obligations and duties and responsibilities, that means our mind is not healthy. Because mind is telling us, I'm here. When you can ignore your mind, then you are spiritually healthy. When you can ignore your body, then you are enjoying perfect bodily health. So these Ayurvedic physicians, their definition of a perfectly healthy person, bodily, psychologically and spiritually, in a state of perfect equilibrium. It corresponds to the spiritual definition of perfect spiritual health. So that's why such a person, he lives in the world, he is not totally insensitive to duties and responsibilities, not at all. But duties and responsibilities are not lying heavily on his shoulders. He performs his duties and responsibilities. He is very sensitive to his problems and the needs to face those challenges, but he is not overburdened. He is not too much concerned. He is not too much anxious about what happens next. This state of mind is a state of perfect psychological health, and that is possible only for a spiritually enlightened person. So, who is such a person? Yanisha sarvabhudanam tasyam jagrati samyami. Samyami is the word. Samyami means a person who is able to restrain and control his senses and mind, where his mind and senses are not dragging him to all kinds of external temptations, leading to anxiety and worries. He is perfect samyami, he is completely self-controlled. Such a person, for so far he is concerned, the world is always non-existent. In the sense, the world is not the only thing. He identifies himself with something much but that transcends the world, much bigger than the world. The Atman, the all-pervading spiritual reality. Yasyam jagrati bhudani sa nisha pasyato munegi. And the ordinary people who are immersed in the worldly enjoyments, who are working 24 hours, 7 days of the week, all the time worrying, all the time facing problems and succeeding very well and suffering much more. The most successful person is not the happiest. So a samyami alone can be a truly enlightened person. For such a person, this world is something that is non-existent. That is not the only thing that exists in the world. There is much more than this world, so far as he is concerned. Now, this is the one important characteristic of a sthita prajna. Sthita prajna yasya saha is sthita prajna. So, this second chapter ends with a description and a definition of who is the spiritually enlightened person. And if you read that, you find that is also a description of a mentally healthy person. And the second chapter is very remarkable. It deals with karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga. It deals with sankhya. It deals with karma yoga. And also it deals with the evolution of karma. I'm not going to repeat again because our classes are being videotaped and it is live streamed and you can find it on YouTube. So I'm not going to repeat those items. Now we are coming to the next verse. Next verse is how such a person interacts the world, how he lives in the midst of all the duties, obligations and challenges and complexities. Apuryamanam achala pradishtam samudram apa pravishanti yaddut taddut kamayam pravishanti sarve sa shantim apnodi na kama kami. Who attains shanti? Shanti means perfect peace of mind. Here shanti doesn't mean just a little relaxation. Such a person attains a state of mental poise, mental balance, mental serenity, which remains undisturbed, unshaken, even in the midst of living, even in the midst of all the problems, all the challenges that he may have to go through in his everyday life. So, sashantim apnodi. He attains perfect peace and happiness and contentment. So, it is a state of mind which remains, which cannot be disturbed. Na kama kami, then who does not attain the peace of mind? A person who goes after every worldly enjoyments, who is always chased by his mind and senses. Our mind becomes our worst enemy when our mind listens to the dictation of the senses. Eyes will drag the mind in one direction, ears will drag the mind in another direction. When we see, when we hear and smell, touch and taste, all these 5 senses of perception will always be dragging the mind into all these different sense objects. Such a mind, it is under the dictation, under the dictatorship of the senses. Such a mind wants to terrorize you. Such a mind becomes your dictator. So what happens when the mind is enslaved by the senses, then it wants to enslave all of us. So such a person can never have peace of mind, because desires can never come to an end. No one in the world has seen the end of desire, except those who realize this fact, that desires have no end. Then only they will be able to go beyond desires. So the important verse is this: Apuryamanam. See, an ocean, Achala Pradishtam Samudram. Samudra means ocean. An ocean, a number of rivers are emptying their waters into the ocean. So desires, temptations, challenges and complexities, different demands, all are arising the mind. Like hundreds of rivers emptying their waters into the ocean. But the ocean remains undisturbed. The ocean is never overflooded. So, apuryamanam achalam, it is absolutely, it remains totally still, stable, without any disturbance, totally undisturbed. Though hundreds of rivers are emptying their waters into the ocean, still the ocean remains, achalam means totally still, stable, undisturbed. Like that, when a desire or millions of desires from outside and from within our own mind emerge in the mind of a spiritually enlightened person, those desires have no impact on his mind. Just as rivers do not disturb the balance of the water in the ocean. Why? Because he has identified himself with something beyond mind. The ordinary mind is like a small, tiny pool or a pond. Even if a small stream, if it enters that pond, the pond may overflow. The ordinary mind. A mind which is attached to desires, that mind takes the form of the desire that it's going after. So that mind becomes a tiny pond. So a few desires can disturb the balance of water of the tiny pond. But suppose we identify ourselves with something transcendental, with the all-pervading spiritual reality, Vedanta calls it Atman, the divine spark that is present in all of us, that is present everywhere. It is immanent, it is omnipresent, and it is transcendental. When we identify ourselves with something which transcends the mind, then desires will come, but we will be able to dictate this desire, and then it is gone. So, when an idea or a desire emerges in our mind, when we are able to dictate it as a problematic desire, then it disappears. We become enslaved, we become affected by the desires only when we are not able to use our discriminating faculty, our discerning faculty. The moment we use our discerning faculty, then desire is like an animal whose teeth are completely removed. It may come to our mind, but we will be able to face it with a sense of non-attachment. Then the desire cannot enslave our mind. So, taddut kamayam pravishanti sarve sa shanti mapnodi na kama kami. Such a person, he remains in a state of perpetual, permanent witnessship. He will be able to watch his own mind. He will be able to observe his own mind. He will be able to observe and carefully analyze how desires and ideas emerge in his mind, and will be able to observe them, study them. Then they won't be able to create problems for him. Desires are a problem only when they go undetected. Second point to remember, and that is an important message of Siddhapragya Lakshana, which Shankaracharya and other teachers have already mentioned, is, I quoted many times earlier, the point is, this is our natural state of mind. So normally, we read any book on psychology and psychiatry, they will tell you, anxiety is natural, phobia is natural, delusions and all these problems are natural. Vedanta tells it is not natural. It is a foreign body. If somebody tells you, well, if you have cancer, cancer is natural to the body. Heart block is natural to the body. No, Vedanta tells you that our natural state of mind is beyond all this. So anxiety is like a foreign body to the body. It is something alien. It is not natural. It is alien. Just like a bacteria or a disease germ, we don't consider this natural. It is something that we want to drive away from our body by taking medicine. It is not natural to us. We consider it's not part of the body. So we take medicine, so we get rid of it. Like that, human mind, by very nature, is one with Atman. That's what Shankaracharya writes, Siddha Prajna. Prajna means enlightened wisdom. That is mind. It is Siddha. Siddha means stable, undisturbed, always in a state of stability and perfect peace and equilibrium. That is the natural state of mind. So all other problems are unnatural. They come from outside. So Shankaracharya says in his commentary, he repeats it again and again, the reason why Lord Krishna decided to give a list of characteristics of a spiritual person in this text. Why did he include, So in the 54th verse, Arjuna asked one question to Krishna. The question is, what are the characteristics of a spiritually enlightened person? Siddha prajnasya ka bhasha samadhistasya keshiva siddhi kim prabhashida kim asida vrajeda kim. This is how the whole discussion begins. Arjuna puts one question to Krishna. What are the characteristics of a spiritually enlightened person? You can also ask the same question, what are the characteristics of a person who has no psychological problem? The prajna is a man whose mind is perfectly stable and undisturbed by whatever happens around him or within him. And in answer to this, in the 55th verse, Lord Krishna, the teacher of the Gita, begins his answer. So, Prajaghadi yadagaman sarvan parthamanogadan atmaneva atmanatushtaha siddha prajnastadochidi. So, who is the atmani eva atmanatushtaha? So, a spiritually enlightened person, he is not seeking anything from outside. He is every minute enjoying this tremendous joy of identifying with his own spiritual identity. I am the Atman. I am not affected by any of the desire. I am not the mind. I am not this body. My true nature is this Atman, which is ever blissful, ever effulgent, is the essence of existence. This is our true nature. That's how Krishna, then Dukkeshu Anudiktamana Sukheshu Vigatas Praga Vidaraga Bhayakroda Siddhi Muni Richadi. That's how it all begins. And we discussed this elaborately so many times during the last few sessions. So the point is, Sthita Prajna is the natural state of a human being. That's how we should begin our life. We should not ever imagine that anxiety is natural to human beings. Anxiety is unnatural to human beings. It's saying like cholera germs are natural to human body. No. Toothache is natural to the teeth. No. If it is natural, then we don't go to a doctor to get rid of it. We don't want to get rid of anything which is natural to us. What is unnatural, what is alien, that's only what we want to get rid of. So, here, the point is, this is the prajna, that is a natural state of human beings. So, Shankaracharya has a famous statement, he says, Sarvatra hi adhyatma shastre kudartha lakshanani yani tani eva sadhanani upadishyante. Why all these characteristics are given? But the great commentator Shankaracharya, who lived in 8th century, says, all these lists are given for our help, for helping us. If we read all these characteristics of a spiritually enlightened person and try to develop those characteristics in our own life, one day we will become enlightened. It is possible. See, self-restraint, awareness, the problem of the pull of the senses, and the fact that these problems are not natural to our mind. These are alien to our mind. When we remember that our real natural state is something that is always blissful, serene, contented and stable, then we will try to identify, then coming back to our natural state, coming back home. So that's why Shankaracharya, another commentator says, Yadeva ki muktanam swabhavigam sheelam tadeva mumukshunam shastrena vidhiyade. Idi prasiddhi. The point is, when we try to meditate and practice on the great characteristic of an enlightened person and try to imbibe them in our own life, then one day we also will become enlightened. So that is the important message of this particular part of the text. So we'll continue. Those of you who have come for the first time, you can listen to the previous sessions which are available in the YouTube. Now we can have interaction for about 10 minutes. Most welcome.
Swamiji talked about this idea of spiritualizing the secular. Is there a way to spiritualize the senses or spiritualize desire?
Yeah, in fact, desires also can be spiritualized. Ego can be spiritualized. So when we develop a high ideal in life, actually we are sublimating our desires. So when we sublimate our desire to a higher spiritual level, some desire to do something good for others or something good for ourselves, a desire to read a great book, a desire to follow a great discipline for some time and a strong determination. Actually, Lord Krishna in the Gita itself says this desire with a strong determination is a must for a beginner in spiritual life. So, Sandushta Satatam Yogi Yadatma Dridanischeka. Sandushta means serene, contented, then self-controlled. Then Dridadisya means a person with a steely mind, strong determination. A strong determination coupled with a higher ideal will help us to conserve our energy and direct and divert our actions and thoughts in one positive direction. And that will eventually help us to reach a point where you find suddenly your ego also has taken a promotion. So it is impossible for beginners in spiritual life to get rid of desire and ego. So they should never try to do that. So Lord Krishna himself gives an example, na buddhi vedam jane dajnanam karma sankinam. The point is, people who are accustomed to doing work with a great desire, great determination, great identification, great plan, they should not be asked, no, tomorrow onwards you should not have any plan or program. It will completely upset, put in imbalance the whole mind. So what you should do, you should tell him, you work hard with strong determination for a higher ideal. That helps us to sublimate our desire and also to evolve, to let our ego evolve to a higher level.
One last thing. So with the senses, can you spiritualize the senses too?
Yeah, everything can be given a spiritual direction. Our senses, thoughts, ideas, technology, modern technology, everything can have a positive use. So that's why, in fact, that's the uniqueness of Vedanta. Vedanta doesn't think of religion as coming from a particular individual on a particular day with sets of rules and regulations. You choose to follow, and if you don't follow, you'll be punished. If you follow, you'll be rewarded. That's not how Vedanta. Vedanta it gives you full freedom to depend upon your own resources, really. If we go deeper and deeper into our own inner resources, you find solutions within ourselves.
So if we are not in a place of spiritual equilibrium, but we're trying to get there, how do you know you're making progress?
Yeah, one way to check ourselves, do we feel a great inner contentment? The state of total freedom from any kind of anxiety, disturbance. And that is our own test. This, not that every action will produce it, but in a descending order, if we go on practicing, you start feeling a kind of inner contentment, inner serenity. It's called in Sanskrit Kridagrityada and Kridarthada. When we do some noble deed, or when we read a noble book, or when we think of some noble thoughts, or when we pray and meditate, whatever it is, after that, if we feel a deep inner contentment, that's a proof that we are moving in the right direction. It happens after several years, sometimes decades. It is not something that we get all of a sudden. But even we begin the journey, we feel this green light. You're on the right track. How do we judge our own mind? If we feel that kind of contentment, we discover deep, intense contentment in doing something good. All the great men who have done great things, they could do that in spite of many challenges because they derived this inner contentment. That's what actually helps us to move ahead in spite of all challenges. So that's a proof is within ourselves, right? Yeah, please.
Swamiji, I have a question. You spoke about non-attachment.
Yeah.
How do you reconcile human love and emotion with the idea of non-attachment?
Yeah, non-attachment, he means not being obsessed to the point of being spiritually enslaved by the sense objects. That's the meaning of anasakti, non-attachment. It is not a negative detachment, separation, a kind of dry, insensitive attitude towards something or somebody. Not at all. It gives us a freedom, a sense of freedom, even when we are doing things. So very often when we do things, we feel a kind of inner bondage. We are bound by that. We become concerned about the results after doing the work and also while doing the work. If we can do something with full concentration, with full dedication, still with too much of concern, then that is the practice of non-attachment. That gives you a feeling of inner freedom. And that helps you to focus more resources, to make use of more resources from your own inner resources and concentrate those resources on the work you are doing. So non-attachment is not insensitivity or a negative remoteness or anything, not at all. Yeah, it's clear to you? Right, thank you. So we will continue this discussion in the coming Fridays. So every Friday at 7:30, we have this program here. You can also get information from our website. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Rama Krishna Arpanamastu.